My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. We as Catholics, as Christians, are we a fasting people or a feasting people? Do we fast or do we feast? I remember growing up in my household, we loved feast days. We loved them a lot. We looked forward to them. We would prepare for them. And in a sense, looking back, I realized that my parents were building up a family culture rooted in Christ and in Christ's life by teaching us how to celebrate the great feast days of the church. Of course, Christmas being, we could say, the culmination. Christmas and Easter were huge days in our house. Really, we lived all the days around those feast days with great celebration. And traditions were tied to those feasts. One very small example. Christmas morning, we had the tradition, not exactly sure why, of having kielbasa, a Polish sausage, for Christmas breakfast. And that was something that we looked forward to. Another tradition was reading a specific children's book out loud on Christmas Eve. Easter Sunday, Easter egg hunt, with all the cousins, everybody running around the backyard looking for eggs. These were little traditions that reflected our feasting. Big feasts like Christmas or Easter or the Assumption of Our Lady or the Immaculate Conception. But then also smaller feast days, even something as simple as the names day of someone in the house, of one of our siblings, congratulating them for their saint's day. And the foods associated with these feasts. So looking back, I could say, yes, we were a feasting people. But then also I have memories of fasting. And those memories, in a sense, are even sharper. The way we would fast on Ash Wednesday or on Good Friday, which were total fasts. But also the sacrifices that we would make during Lent, which we would struggle to keep through those 40 days. Or also the way our parents taught us to live habitual mortification, small sacrifices that we could offer up to God and offer up for specific intentions. Sometimes I remember being told, well, why don't you offer that up for so-and-so? Praying with our bodies, that hunger that teaches us to be spiritual. And so, looking back, I could say we were also a fasting people. So do we fast or do we feast? Jesus, this is the question that is posed to you today in the gospel reading from the Gospel of Luke. And they said to him, the disciples of John fast often, and they offer prayers. And so do the disciples of the Pharisees. But your disciples eat and drink. And so we're presented with this kind of dichotomy. Hey, the Pharisees, the disciples of John the Baptist, those groups, right, those Jews, they're fasting. They live disciplines. They offer prayers. But all we see your guys doing is partying. The disciples of Jesus, they go to parties, they eat, they drink, they celebrate. So, what is the right path? What are we supposed to do? And Jesus, you answer them in such a deep way. In a sense, you go past that dichotomy and you say, can you make wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. So Jesus, you kind of shift the question to not look so much at whether it's fasting or feasting, but you center our minds on you as the bridegroom. And that's what we want to pray about in these 10 minutes, is to focus on the fact that you are the bridegroom and that we, the church, are your bride. And you might recall that other parable of the 10 virgins, right? The 5 foolish virgins and the 5 wise virgins. All of the wedding, in a sense, is culminating in the bridegroom arriving at the house of the bride. It's the coming of the bridegroom. And when he arrives, the celebration begins. When the two are united, the celebration takes off. It's time to party. And so when to fast or when to feast has everything to do with Jesus. Is Jesus with us, or has he left us? Now, we could say that we're constantly in this cycle of fasting and feasting. What are the reasons for our fasting? Well, for the Christian, fasting is ultimately about fasting from sin, right? So in order for Jesus, the bridegroom, to be in my heart, I need to die to sin. I need to make room for him, and therefore I need to fast, to die to my passions. Fasting is also an ancient way of preparing for the Eucharist. Again, the Eucharist is Jesus himself. The Eucharist is the bridegroom who wants to enter into my home. He wants to come into my body in communion. And so we refrain from eating, we fast before Mass, precisely as an expression of the fact that, in a way, the bridegroom has been taken away from us for a time, and now he's coming back, and once we receive him in communion, we will feast. What a beautiful thing. You may know that in the early church, there were these total fasts that would precede all of the major feasts of the year. And so the ancient name for this fast was statio, from the verb sto, or stare in Latin, which means to stand watch, to be on guard, or in vigil, just like those virgins waiting by the door for the bridegroom to arrive. And the statio fast was total. So people wouldn't eat for almost a whole day before the big feast. And it was a means of watching and of waiting for something, right? For someone, for the arrival of the bridegroom on the big feast day of, for example, Christmas or Easter. So that total fast is still kept in a way before every Mass, right? Before receiving you, Jesus, in Holy Communion, I want to, in a sense, empty myself and prepare for your arrival, to be on watch. So that's a good way to think about our fasting before Mass. You know, sometimes we can cut corners if we're not careful. We can say, well, you know, I've got half an hour here. I won't really be receiving the host until another half hour within Mass. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. And we can kind of cut corners and treat the fast very lightly, as simply like a rule, you know, or some kind of norm that we have to fulfill in order to go up to the Eucharist. But let's go deeper. Jesus, help us to understand more deeply the reason for this fasting in order to feast. Because in a way, if we're going to Mass every day, or at least every Sunday, there's like this cycle where we're going back and forth between fasting and feasting, and we're revolving around the bridegroom. Jesus, we want to like dance around you. We want to constantly be looking at you and seeing you going away and then coming back to us each time again in the Mass. What a beautiful thing. Now we know that full feasting will only be possible in heaven. Right? Jesus has, in a sense, been taken away from us when he ascended into heaven, when he went back to the Father. And we miss him. And so there's always an element of fasting in our life, because the bridegroom we're not fully united with him until, God willing, we are united with him in heaven. So full feasting only in heaven. And here we celebrate in little ways the fact that the bridegroom is with us sacramentally. He's with us in our soul and grace. But we're always looking, Jesus, forward to that great feast at the end of time. We ask Our Lady, Mother Mary, help us to know how to both fast and feast. Let's not swing too far in either direction, but to have this healthy balance so that we're always looking at your Son. We're always looking at the bridegroom. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you've communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help in putting them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.